Picture this. For 30 years, Johnny Carson was America's most beloved late-night companion. Every weeknight, millions invited him into their living rooms, charmed by his wit and boyish smile that made him feel like family. He was the king of television, living what seemed like the perfect life. But behind that carefully crafted persona lay a man tormented by secrets so dark and regrets so devastating that he took them to his grave. What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you thought you knew about Johnny Carson. These aren't just career disappointments. These are soul-crushing regrets that haunted him every single day until his death. The man who made millions laugh spent his final years consumed by guilt, bitterness, and the painful realization that his greatest successes had come at an unimaginable personal cost. Johnny was the most private superstar who ever lived, according to a longtime NBC executive. What audiences saw was just the surface, a carefully constructed version that hid the disappointments and mistakes that tormented him until the end. Tonight, we're exposing the 10 biggest regrets that Johnny Carson never publicly acknowledged, private sorrows and professional betrayals that reveal the tragic man behind the television legend. But first, you need to understand why Carson's most devastating regret involved a woman who trusted him completely, only to be destroyed by his cruelest act of revenge. Joan Rivers was more than just Carson's permanent guest host. She was like the daughter he never had. For years, she stepped in whenever Johnny took vacations, their on-air chemistry delighting audiences. Behind the scenes, their relationship appeared equally warm, with Carson mentoring Rivers on hosting. She believed he truly cared about her career, her success, her future in television. That trust made his betrayal all the more devastating. In 1986, Rivers accepted an offer to host The Late Show on Fox, but made one fatal mistake. She didn't tell Carson first. According to Carson's longtime producer, Johnny learned about Joan's show from Fox's press release, not from Joan herself. In his mind, this wasn't just business. It was the ultimate act of treachery by someone he'd treated like family. Carson's response was swift and absolutely brutal. He immediately blacklisted Rivers and refused all her attempts at reconciliation. But what happened next revealed the true depths of his cruelty. When Rivers' husband Edgar died by suicide in 1987, Carson remained completely unmoved. Joan called Johnny after Edgar's death, hoping he might express condolences, but he wouldn't even take the call. Multiple sources later revealed that Carson regretted how cold his reaction was, especially after witnessing Joan's devastating grief. But by then, his pride had trapped him in a prison of his own making. Rivers remained banned until Jimmy Fallon welcomed her back in 2014, 9 years after Carson's death. The man who had been like a father had become her most ruthless enemy. But if you think that was Carson's most expensive mistake, wait until you hear how one romantic impulse cost him over $20 million. Johnny Carson had a fatal weakness. He fell in love fast and married without thinking. On September 30th, 1972, he surprised Joanna Holland with marriage papers during what she thought was an anniversary celebration. It was classic Johnny, simultaneously romantic and reckless, according to his attorney. He didn't consult anyone or have lawyers draft any prenuptial agreement. He just decided to get married and did it. 3 years later, Holland surprised him right back with divorce papers. The settlement was one of Hollywood's most expensive at the time, approximately $20 million. What made this devastating was its repetitive nature. His second wife had also received a substantial settlement, meaning Carson had surrendered nearly $30 million to ex-wives by 1983. Ed McMahon later recalled Carson telling him, "Ed, never marry anyone without a lawyer in the room. Love fades, but alimony is forever." But the money wasn't Carson's biggest regret about his personal life. That honor belongs to a much more devastating failure. The most haunting regret involved his youngest son, Rick, who struggled with mental health issues throughout his adult life, including bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. As Rick's behavior became increasingly erratic, leading to multiple arrests and psychiatric hospitalizations, Carson did what he always did when faced with emotional complexity. He withdrew completely. Johnny was completely ill-equipped to handle Rick's problems, revealed a family friend. He grew up in that Midwestern stoic tradition where you didn't discuss feelings. Carson's solution was to write a check rather than offer personal support. He wasn't cold-hearted, he just had no emotional tools to deal with mental illness. The tragic culmination came on June 21st, 1991, when Rick Carson died when his car plunged down an embankment. He was 39 years old. Carson briefly acknowledged the loss on The Tonight Show before quickly returning to the regular format. But privately, friends reported that he was devastated. After Rick's death, Johnny would sometimes mention him after having a few drinks, admitting, "I should have done more, and I didn't know how to help him." Carson's emotional paralysis didn't just affect his family, it cost him the chance to showcase one of comedy's greatest legends. Richard Pryor was revolutionizing American comedy in the 1970s with his raw examinations of race and power. Critics hailed him as a genius, yet during this period of creative brilliance, Pryor was noticeably absent from The Tonight Show, the most important platform for stand-up comedians. It was an open secret that Carson was uncomfortable with Pryor's material, explained a talent coordinator. Johnny appreciated technical skill in comedy, but Pryor's raw, profane style made him nervous. He liked being in control of his show, and Pryor was fundamentally uncontrollable. As Pryor's cultural impact became undeniable, Carson reportedly began to reconsider his approach. Around 1990, Johnny actually said to me, "We should have found a way to showcase Richard more often." "That was a mistake," recalled a producer. Coming from Johnny, who rarely admitted error, that was significant. By then, however, Pryor's multiple sclerosis had progressed significantly, and the opportunity had been lost forever. But Carson's pattern of cutting people out extended far beyond professional relationships. It destroyed a friendship that had once brought him genuine joy. Don Rickles and Johnny Carson shared electric on-screen chemistry that produced some of The Tonight Show's most memorable moments. Their relationship gradually cooled, following an incident when Rickles made an unscripted joke about Carson's recent divorce and alimony payments, touching precisely on the personal matters Carson considered off-limits. While Carson laughed it off on camera, backstage he was furious. Johnny didn't shout. That wasn't his style, recalled a staff writer. He just went cold, and Rickles knew immediately he'd made a mistake. In later years, Carson made overtures toward reconciliation, but that special connection was gone. Johnny once told me, "I wish I hadn't let that one joke change things, but I did," revealed a mutual friend. Carson's grudge-holding extended to his relationship with the very network that made him a star. For 30 years, Carson's relationship with NBC made both enormous money, yet behind the partnership lay tensions Carson would later regret not addressing. Johnny was the goose-laying golden eggs, but NBC never fully trusted him with the nest, explained a former executive. Carson spent the first 2 decades as essentially an NBC employee, not gaining ownership until 1981, a move he later said should have happened far earlier. Adding to this frustration was Carson's discovery that NBC had repeatedly explored replacing him during contract negotiations, even during periods of record ratings. Johnny found out NBC had been in talks with other potential hosts during nearly every contract cycle, said a producer. He told me, "You give a network your life, and they still keep a knife for your back pocket." But perhaps Carson's most petty regret involved a fellow comedian whose arrogance triggered his vindictive impulses. When Chevy Chase appeared on The Tonight Show in the late 1970s, the interview became one of the most awkward guest spots in the show's history. "It was a disaster from the moment Chevy walked out," recalled a camera operator. "He came across as arrogant, unprepared, and worst of all for a comedian, not funny." The interview culminated when Chase made an unscripted joke about Carson's multiple divorces, hitting precisely the personal territory Carson considered off-limits. The ban remained in effect for Carson's entire tenure, but in later years he reportedly expressed that his reaction may have been disproportionate. In the mid-90s, Johnny mentioned that he probably should have given Chevy another chance, saying Chevy was a pain in the ass, but I could have been bigger about it. Carson's grudge-holding extended to an entire gender, revealing perhaps his most professionally damaging blind spot. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, The Tonight Show was criticized for its lack of female comedians beyond Joan Rivers and Phyllis Diller. Johnny had this fixed idea about what his middle American audience would accept, explained a former talent coordinator. He believed they wanted pretty, non-threatening women and funny men. This resulted in overlooking a generation of groundbreaking female comedians like Elaine Boozler, Sandra Bernhard, and Paula Poundstone. There was an unofficial quota system, recalled a writer. We might book one female comic a month, if that. After retirement, Carson reportedly expressed regret. Around 1995, Johnny told me, "We missed a lot of good ones. I was wrong about what the audience wanted," revealed a producer. But all of these professional regrets pale in comparison to Carson's final and most devastating realization. After 3 decades as America's most welcome guest, Johnny Carson retreated into near-complete seclusion following his retirement. His Malibu compound became a fortress, with Carson rarely venturing out. By the late 1990s, those close to him recognized that Carson was questioning this extreme withdrawal. Johnny created this perfect bubble for himself: beautiful home, amazing views, complete privacy, and then discovered it was actually a prison, explained a longtime friend. By the time he realized it, his social muscles had atrophied. He'd forgotten how to just be with people. In one of his most revealing moments around 2001, Carson sent a handwritten letter to a former producer that included the poignant observation, "I made millions laugh, but most nights I sit by myself." This growing awareness represented his deepest regret, that he had constructed a life that looked perfect from the outside but left him fundamentally alone. These regrets reveal a Johnny Carson far more complex than the smooth television host who entered American homes for 3 decades. Behind the familiar smile was a man who struggled with intimacy, held grudges fiercely, and ultimately found himself isolated by the very boundaries he created to protect himself. The true tragedy isn't his professional missteps or financial losses, but the realization that the man who brought joy to millions spent his final years consumed by loneliness, unable to bridge the gap between his public success and private emptiness.